In the grand cosmic joke that was the Galactic Council, there existed exactly one legend that could make even the most battle-hardened Korthak warrior wet themselves in terror. Not the tale of the reality eaters who consumed entire dimensions for breakfast. Not the story of the void singers whose melodies could crack planets in half. No, the legend that sent chills down every sentient being's equivalent of a spine was far more ridiculous. Humans. Ambassador Clixon adjusted his ceremonial antenna with one of his 6 trembling limbs while reviewing the morning's intelligence reports. As the Council's chief xenobiological threat assessor, which was basically a fancy title for a guy who worries about scary aliens professionally, Clixon had dedicated his entire career to cataloging every possible way the universe could end civilization as they knew it. He had files on reality-bending parasites, hive minds that consumed stars, and even a particularly nasty species that turned planets into abstract art installations. But humans were supposed to be extinct. Dead. Gone. A cautionary tale from the dark ages of galactic history. The intelligence report in his mandibles suggested otherwise. Initial contact successful with Sol 3 inhabitants. He read aloud, his voice climbing several octaves with each word. Species designation confirmed. Homo sapiens. Status. Very much alive and surprisingly chatty. Clixon's compound eyes dilated in horror. Somewhere in the depths of his bureaucratic soul, he could feel his comfortable worldview crumbling like a stale space cookie. The humans weren't myths. They weren't bedtime stories told to frighten young aliens into behaving. They were real. They were active. And according to this report, they were asking if anyone wanted to hang out and maybe grab some beers. The legends spoke of being so terrifyingly adaptable that they could survive anywhere, so impossibly stubborn that they refused to acknowledge defeat even when facing extinction, and so devastatingly creative in their violence that they once ended a war by convincing their enemy's own weapons to switch sides. The ancient texts described them as deathworlders, who treated radiation like a mild inconvenience and considered planetary-scale disasters as character-building experiences. But the most terrifying part, the legends claimed humans did all of this while maintaining what their own species called a sense of humor about the whole thing. Clixon's antennae drooped as he contemplated the implications. If humans were real, then every terrifying story about them might be true. The tale of how they turned their homeworld's most dangerous predators into pets. The account of how they looked at the vacuum of space and decided it needed more stuff in it. The absolutely ridiculous claim that they somehow managed to make friends with their planet's weather by hitting it with sticks until it behaved. His communication device chirped with an incoming priority message. The text that appeared made his exoskeleton spontaneously molt. A human representative requesting formal diplomatic meeting. Name Jake Martinez. Additional note, brings own snacks. Please advise if allergic to peanuts. Clixon stared at the message for a long moment, then slowly reached for his emergency panic button, the one reserved for galaxy-ending catastrophes. Because if the legends were true, if humans were really as described in the ancient warnings, then the arrival of someone named Jake Martinez, patient worried about peanut allergies, might just be the most terrifying development in galactic history. The cosmic comedy of errors was about to begin, and Clixon had front-row seats to what promised to be either the most entertaining or most apocalyptic first contact in recorded history. Jake Martinez had always considered himself a pretty laid-back guy. As Earth's Director of Interstellar Relations, a position he'd accidentally gotten after being the only person in the building when the aliens called, Jake approached his job with the same casual confidence he brought to weekend barbecues. After all, how hard could diplomacy be? You showed up, you were nice to people, and you tried not to spill anything on important documents. Standing in the pristine corridors of Galactic Council Station Alpha, wearing his lucky Hawaiian shirt and carrying a backpack full of beef jerky, Jake was beginning to suspect that maybe his preparation methods weren't entirely adequate. The alien delegation waiting for him looked like they were attending their own funeral. Ambassador Clixon, a 6-foot-tall insect creature wearing what appeared to be the galaxy's most elaborate business suit, was visibly shaking. His companions, representing various species Jake couldn't even begin to pronounce, seemed to be having some sort of group anxiety attack. "Hey there," Jake said, raising his hand in what he thought was a friendly wave. I'm Jake. Thanks for inviting me to your space station. This place is incredible. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The aliens fainted on the spot. Clixon made a sound like a smoke detector having an existential crisis. A crystalline being in the corner began rapidly changing colors in what Jake assumed was either their species' equivalent of panic or a really aggressive disco routine. He's showing his digits, Clixon whispered to his aide, who was furiously taking notes. The legends spoke of this. The threat display of the opposable appendages. Jake lowered his hand, confused. Sorry, did I do something wrong? I was just saying hi. It speaks casually of violence. Another alien muttered. The informal greeting patterns indicate a predator at ease in hostile territory. What? No, I was just being friendly. Jake reached into his backpack, causing half the delegation to dive behind furniture. I brought snacks. Want some trail mix? The remaining conscious aliens stared in horror at the innocent bag of nuts and dried fruit, as if Jake had just offered them weapons-grade plutonium. He's offering to share his kill. Clixon translated for his frantically scribbling aide. This is either a gesture of dominance or an invitation to join his pack. Possibly both. But Jake looked around the room at the cowering aliens and wondered if maybe his guidance counselor had been right about him lacking natural diplomatic instincts. Look, I think there might be some confusion here. I'm just a regular guy from Earth. I work in accounting. I have a houseplant named Gerald, and my biggest life achievement is getting my neighbor to stop playing death metal at 3 in the morning. I'm not sure what you think I am, but I'm probably not it. He claims mundane origins, Clixon whispered. Classic human psychological warfare. Next he'll tell us about his offspring or his food preparation methods. Well, actually, I do make a pretty mean lasagna, Jake said helpfully. The remaining aliens promptly fainted. Jake stood alone in a room full of unconscious extraterrestrials, holding a bag of trail mix and wondering if this was how all diplomatic missions went. He'd specifically asked his supervisor what to expect, and the only advice he'd gotten was try not to start any wars. Apparently, that bar was set higher than he'd initially thought. When Clixon finally regained consciousness, he found Jake sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully arranging the unconscious aliens in more comfortable positions and making sure they were all breathing properly. You tended to the fallen, Clixon said, his voice filled with something between awe and terror. Yeah, well, seemed like the right thing to do. That blue guy was lying at a really awkward angle. Jake gestured to a reptilian alien he'd propped against a wall. Is everyone okay? Should I call Space 911 or something? Clixon stared at the human who had just demonstrated what his species called compassion for the defeated while maintaining what appeared to be complete tactical awareness of his surroundings. Every legend was true. Humans were apex predators who somehow combined lethal efficiency with incomprehensible kindness. Mr. Martinez, Clixon said carefully, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting for when my colleagues are more prepared for your presence. Sure thing, Jake said, standing up and causing Clixon to instinctively step backward. Sorry about all the fainting. Do I smell weird or something? I used extra deodorant. As Jake left the meeting room, cheerfully waving goodbye and promising to bring better snacks next time, Clixon realized that first contact with humanity wasn't going to be a diplomatic challenge. It was going to be a survival exercise. Dr. Vex Thornbottom prided himself on being the galaxy's foremost expert on extinct civilizations. His 17 doctoral degrees in xenoarchaeology, mythological anthropology, and theoretical doomology made him the undisputed authority on species too dangerous to exist anymore, which was why his current panic attack was particularly embarrassing. They're not extinct, he wheezed to his research assistant, a blob-like creature named Glob, who took excellent notes despite lacking traditional appendages. The humans. They're alive, Glob. They're alive, and one of them is named Jake. Glob gurgled sympathetically while frantically accessing the university's archived files. As Thornbottom's breathing returned to normal, he stared at the holographic displays showing decades of his research on humanity's supposed extinction. research that was now revealed to be spectacularly wrong. The human legend had started, like most galactic nightmares, with a kernel of truth wrapped in several thousand years of increasingly hysterical storytelling. The original records spoke of a species from a world so hostile that survival required constant adaptation, creativity, and an absolutely unreasonable refusal to admit defeat. Early contact reports described beings who had somehow survived an extinction event that killed off their planet's megafauna by developing tools, agriculture, and what their species cheerfully called civilization. But the reports that followed painted an increasingly terrifying picture. Humans had weaponized everything. Their music could induce emotional responses in other species. Their stories could implant ideas that spread through populations like viruses. They had even turned their reproductive processes into recreational activities, which most species found either incomprehensible or deeply disturbing. The Korthak war records, Thornbottom muttered, pulling up a particularly dramatic account. Listen to this, Glob. The humans arrived in ships that should not have been able to fly, using propulsion methods that violated several laws of physics. When we destroyed their vessels, they survived in the vacuum of space long enough to be rescued. When we cornered them on the ground, they dug tunnels faster than our sensors could track. When we tried to negotiate, they offered us food and asked about our families. Glob made a questioning burble. Exactly. Who responds to invasion by offering snacks? It's either supreme confidence or complete insanity, and both options are terrifying. Thornbottom continued reading. The humans ended the war by convincing our computers that fighting was mathematically inefficient and socially awkward. Our own ships began refusing orders and suggesting peace talks. The legend had grown with each retelling. Stories spread of humans who could survive anything, adapt to everything, and somehow maintain optimism in the face of cosmic horror. They were described as beings who looked at the universe's attempts to kill them and responded with what their species called spite and a good attitude. But the most unsettling part of the human legend wasn't their supposed invincibility or their habit of befriending their environment's attempts to murder them. It was their reputation for what the ancient texts called aggressive friendliness. Humans, according to the stories, would adopt anything. Stray animals, broken machines, hostile alien species, entire ecosystems, abandoned planets, and apparently each other with disturbing regularity. Look at this report from the vegan sector, Thornbottom said, his voice climbing higher. A human expedition found a planet populated by sentient crystals who communicated through subsonic vibrations. The crystals had been isolated for millions of years and were convinced that flesh-based life was impossible. The humans' response was to learn their language, set up cultural exchange programs, and establish a thriving trade relationship based on sharing music and geological surveys. Glob made a sound that could have been awe or nausea. They turned first contact into a friendship, Glob, with rocks. Singing rocks, but still rocks. Thornbottom pulled up another file. And here's a report about humans encountering a space station run by artificial intelligences who had concluded that organic life was inefficient and messy. The AIs were planning to sterilize their local sector for cleanliness purposes. The humans convinced them that messiness was a feature, not a bug, and somehow got them interested in gardening. The pattern was consistent across every report. Humans encountered something hostile, dangerous, or impossible, and their response was invariably to try making friends with it. When that worked, they'd celebrate. When it didn't work, they'd try harder. When it absolutely couldn't work, they'd find a way to make it work anyway, and then act like it was the most natural thing in the universe. No wonder everyone thought they were extinct, Thornbottom realized. The alternative was accepting that somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that treated the universe like a particularly challenging friendship opportunity. His communication device chimed with an urgent message from the Galactic Council. Apparently, Sci-Fi, the very much alive human representative, was requesting to attend formal council sessions and wanted to know if anyone had dietary restrictions he should be aware of when bringing snacks. Thornbottom stared at the message for a long moment, then turned to Glob. I think I need to update my research files. Glob burbled in agreement. All of them. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to inspire awe and reverence in all who entered. Towering crystalline columns stretched toward a domed ceiling that displayed the swirling majesty of local nebulae, while representatives from 200 species sat in carefully arranged tiers that demonstrated the mathematical perfection of interstellar cooperation. It was a temple to diplomacy, a monument to civilization, and absolutely the worst possible place to introduce Jake Martinez to galactic politics. Jake walked into the chamber wearing his second-best Hawaiian shirt, the one with the slightly smaller pineapples, and carrying what appeared to be a homemade casserole dish. The effect on the assembled delegates was immediate and devastating. A wave of terrified silence spread through the chamber like ripples from a dropped stone, followed by the distinctive sounds of various species preparing for imminent doom. "Wow," Jake said, looking around appreciatively. "This place is amazing. Is that a real nebula up there or just a really good screensaver?" 300 alien eyes, sensors, and perception organs tracked his movement as he made his way to the designated human seating area. Ambassador Clixon, who had been assigned the thankless task of introducing Earth's representative, gripped his ceremonial speaking staff with all 6 limbs and tried to remember his emergency protocols. "Honored delegates," Clixon began, his voice only slightly resembling the sound of grinding metal, "I present to you the representative of the Sol system, the human known as Jake Martinez." Jake waved cheerfully at the assembly, causing a Methonian delegate to emit what might have been a war cry, or possibly a mating call. "Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I brought tuna casserole in case anyone gets hungry during the meeting." The whispered translations that followed Jake's introduction painted a picture of cosmic horror. "He brings the flesh of sea creatures," muttered the Aquatic Coalition representative. "He offers sustenance extracted from Earth's oceans," the Environmental Protection Alliance delegate added. "He presents tokens of his world's subjugated marine life," concluded the Theoretical Pacifist Union spokesman, all of them managing to make tuna casserole sound like a war crime. Council Speaker Meridian, a floating jellyfish-like entity with centuries of diplomatic experience, attempted to restore order. "Human Jake Martinez, we welcome your species to this assembly of civilized worlds. Perhaps you could share your people's intentions regarding galactic integration." "Oh, that's easy," Jake said, standing up and somehow making the simple action look like a threat display. "We're just excited to meet everyone and maybe make some friends. Earth's been pretty lonely, you know. We've got all these movies about aliens, but until now we figured you guys were probably made up. It's like finding out Santa Claus is real, except instead of bringing presents, you brought spaceships and really complicated politics." The comparison to a mythological gift-giving entity who surveilled populations and broke into homes caused several delegates to activate personal defense shields. "We'd love to learn about your cultures," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the rising panic. "Share some of our own stuff too. We've got music, food, stories, games. Oh, and we're really good at fixing things that are broken. My neighbor back home says I could fix anything with enough duct tape and determination." He speaks of adhesive-based warfare, Clixon translated frantically. "The humans have weaponized their repair technologies." That's when things went from diplomatically awkward to genuinely catastrophic. The chamber's main doors burst open, and Commander Zara Blackstone strode in wearing full military dress uniform, her expression suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. As Earth's Director of Defense Relations, Zara had the kind of presence that made career soldiers straighten their spines and diplomats check their life insurance policies. "Sorry I'm late," Zara announced, her voice carrying the sort of authority that brooked no argument. "Traffic was murder, and someone forgot to mention this place doesn't have parking for shuttles with defensive armaments." If Jake's arrival had caused panic, Zara's entrance triggered something approaching mass hysteria. Here was a human who looked exactly like the legends described, confident, alert, and radiating the sort of competent lethality that suggested she could end civilizations before lunch and still have time for paperwork. "Jake," she said, nodding to her colleague, "how's the meet and greet going?" "Great," Jake replied with his characteristic obliviousness. "Everyone's been really quiet, but I think they're just shy." The sight of 2 humans casually conversing while surrounded by hundreds of terrified aliens was apparently too much for Council Speaker Meridian's composure. Code extinction. The jellyfish entity announced, activating emergency protocols that hadn't been used in 3 centuries. All delegates evacuate to secure positions. This is not a drill. As alarms blared and delegates scrambled for exits, Jake looked around the rapidly emptying chamber with confusion. Did I say something wrong? I haven't even gotten to the part about Earth's nuclear weapons yet. Zara raised an eyebrow. Maybe save that for the second meeting, Jake. Right, Jake said, picking up his casserole dish. Should we leave too? Or do you think they want us to wait here? I'm thinking we might want to work on our approach, Zara said, watching the last of the delegates disappear through emergency exits. Either that, or invest in some really good public relations help. In the empty chamber, 2 humans stood among overturned chairs and abandoned diplomatic notes, wondering if maybe their species needed to practice their social skills before the next galactic gathering. Jake Martinez sat in what the Galactic Council generously called a cultural exchange suite, but what was obviously a very polite jail cell. The accommodations were pleasant enough, with a view of the local star system and a food dispenser that had been programmed with what someone thought humans might want to eat. Unfortunately, whoever had programmed it seemed to believe humans subsisted entirely on a substance labeled Nutri-Paste, with familiar Earth flavors that tasted like someone had described pizza to a computer that had never experienced taste. So, Jake said to Zara, who was examining their cell's security systems with professional interest, I'm starting to think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot with these folks. You think? Zara replied, running her fingers along what appeared to be an energy barrier. The evacuation alarms were a pretty big clue. I just don't get it. I was being friendly. I brought food. I asked about their families. What more do people want from a first contact situation? Before Zara could answer, Ambassador Clixon appeared outside their cell, flanked by what appeared to be the galaxy's most nervous security detail. His ceremonial antennae were drooping with what Jake was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of chronic stress. Humans Jake Martinez and Zara Blackstone. Clixon began formally, the Galactic Council requires clarification regarding your species' intentions. Our intentions? Jake stood up, inadvertently causing 3 guards to reach for their weapons. We want to make friends, share some culture, maybe trade for some of that cool technology you guys have. Pretty standard stuff, I thought. You see, Clixon said, consulting a holographic display, this is where our confusion arises. According to our historical records, your species is renowned for what the ancient texts call aggressive expansion through enforced friendship protocols. Zara and Jake exchanged glances. Come again? Zara asked. Clixon's display showed what appeared to be a collection of ancient documents, all describing humans in terms that made them sound like a cross between Terminators and overly enthusiastic camp counselors. The legends speak of humans who could not be deterred, could not be defeated, and could not be discouraged from attempting to establish positive relationships with other species. That doesn't sound entirely wrong, Jake admitted. The records indicate that humans treat survival challenges as recreational activities, Clixon continued, and that they respond to hostility with increased friendliness, that they have weaponized their capacity for emotional attachment and use it to form strategic alliances with any species willing to accept food offerings. Okay, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of sinister, Jake said, but we're really just trying to be nice. The ancient texts describe humans as creatures who looked at a universe trying to kill them and decided to make it their pet. Clixon read from his display. Who responded to extinction-level events by developing new hobbies. Who somehow convinced their planet's apex predators to become companions and then claimed this was domestication rather than some form of psychological warfare. Zara was starting to look amused. They're not wrong about the dog thing. The most terrifying entry, Clixon continued, describes humans as beings who treat the unknown not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a friend they haven't met yet. Well, yeah, Jake said. Why wouldn't we? Before Clixon could explain exactly why that attitude was cosmically terrifying, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in red, and automated announcements echoed through the facility. Attention all personnel. Unauthorized vessels detected in Sector 7. All security teams to battle stations. This is not a drill. Space pirates, one of the guards explained helpfully, the Ravager clan. They've been terrorizing this sector for months. Pirates? Jake perked up with interest. Like actual space pirates? With ships and lasers and probably really cool hats? They are a significant threat, Clixon said nervously. The Ravagers are known for their ruthless efficiency and complete disregard for galactic law. How many ships? Zara asked, her military instincts kicking in. 12 attack vessels, the guard replied, against our 3 defensive platforms. The odds are not favorable. Jake looked at Zara. Zara looked at Jake. Both of them looked at the energy barrier containing them, then at the increasingly panicked aliens in the corridor. You know, Jake said conversationally, we could probably help with this. Help? Clixon's compound eyes widened. You wish to engage in combat operations? Well, not combat exactly, Jake said, more like problem solving. Humans are really good at problem solving. It's true, Zara added. Give us a complex problem with multiple variables and unclear parameters, and we'll find a solution nobody thought was possible. Usually while making friends with something we probably shouldn't, Jake added cheerfully. Clixon stared at the 2 humans who had just offered to help defend the station from space pirates while making it sound like they were volunteering for a community service project. According to the legends, this was exactly the sort of situation where humans became most dangerous. Not because they were violent, but because they were about to demonstrate why the rest of the galaxy had spent centuries being terrified of their aggressively optimistic approach to problem solving. The command center of Galactic Council Station Alpha had seen many crises over the centuries, but none quite like watching 2 humans treat a pirate attack as what Jake cheerfully called a learning experience. Commander Zara Blackstone stood at the tactical display, analyzing the incoming Ravager fleet with the sort of professional calm that made seasoned military officers nervous. While Jake Martinez had somehow convinced the station's artificial intelligence to show him baby pictures of the crew's pets. 12 ships, Zara announced, standard Ravager configuration. Heavy weapons, light shields, and probably crewed by people who think diplomacy is what happens to other species. The Ravagers have never been successfully negotiated with, Clixon said, his antennae drooping with resignation. They respond to all communication attempts with increased aggression and demands for tribute. Well, Jake said, looking up from a holographic display of something that might have been a Centaurian hamster. Have you tried asking them what they really want? What they want is to steal everything we have and possibly sell us into slavery, the station commander replied. Yeah, but what do they really want? Jake insisted. Like deep down. Everyone wants something. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Before anyone could explain why space pirates probably weren't motivated by emotional issues, the communication system crackled to life. The voice that emerged sounded like someone gargling gravel while chain smoking. Council station. This is Captain Bloodfang of the Ravager clan. Surrender your valuables and prepare to be boarded, or we'll blast you into component atoms. See? Jake said brightly. He's opening negotiations. That's progress. Jake, Zara said gently. That wasn't a negotiation. That was a threat. Same thing, really. He's communicating his needs and establishing parameters for interaction. Jake activated the communication system before anyone could stop him. Hi there, Captain Bloodfang. This is Jake from Earth. Nice to meet you. Love the dramatic entrance, by the way. Very theatrical. The silence that followed was the sort that usually preceded either laughter or violence. When Captain Bloodfang's voice returned, it carried a note of confusion. Did you just compliment my attack formation? Well, yeah. It's got great symmetry, and the timing was perfect, very professional. You guys must have practiced that. Jake paused thoughtfully. Though I have to ask, why the whole piracy thing? Seems like a lot of work for what's probably not great job security. What? I mean, constantly looking over your shoulder, never knowing if the next score is going to be your last, probably terrible health benefits. Have you considered other career options? You've clearly got leadership skills and tactical training. Zara watched in fascination as Jake somehow turned a pirate attack into what appeared to be career counseling. Around the command center, the alien crew stared in various degrees of horror and amazement as the human continued his impossibly casual conversation with one of the galaxy's most feared raiders. "Look," Captain Bloodfang said, sounding increasingly confused, "I'm supposed to be robbing you right now." "Right, but why?" Jake asked. "I mean, what's the underlying motivation? Are you supporting a family? Trying to fund a dream project? Making a political statement? There's got to be a story here." We need money for ship repairs and crew wages," Bloodfang admitted, apparently hypnotized by Jake's relentless friendliness. "See? That's completely reasonable. Running a fleet is expensive." Jake turned to the command crew. "Do we have any job openings? These folks sound like they'd be great at security work." "You want to offer the pirates jobs?" Clixon asked faintly. "Why not? They're obviously good at organization, they work well under pressure, and they've got their own transportation. Plus, think about the stories they could tell at the office holiday party." While Jake continued his impossible negotiation, Zara had been quietly working at the tactical station. With the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years solving problems the galaxy thought were unsolvable, she had identified the Ravager fleet's primary weakness. Their ships were held together with what appeared to be spite and salvaged parts. "Jake," she said, "ask them about their maintenance schedules." "Captain Bloodfang, my colleague wants to know about your ship maintenance. Are you keeping up with the recommended service intervals?" "Our what?" Bloodfang replied. "We fix things when they break." "Oh no," Zara said, genuinely concerned. "That's terrible for resale value. And probably dangerous. Jake, tell them we've got a full service bay here. We could help them get their fleet up to proper safety standards." What followed was perhaps the most surreal hour in recorded galactic history. The Ravager clan, faced with humans who treated their piracy attempt as an opportunity for fleet maintenance and career counseling, found themselves docked at Council Station Alpha while Jake organized what he called a cultural exchange program, and Zara supervised emergency repairs on ships that probably should have exploded years ago. "This is impossible," Clixon muttered, watching human engineers work alongside former pirates to replace faulty life support systems. "You've turned an armed robbery into a job fair." "People just want to feel valued," Jake said, handing Captain Bloodfang what appeared to be a job application for the Council's security division. "Once you get past all the threatening and posturing, most conflicts are really just communication problems." 3 months later, Ambassador Clixon found himself writing a report that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. The human representative had not only prevented a pirate attack, but had somehow convinced the entire Ravager clan to become the Council's most effective security contractors. Jake Martinez, the mild-mannered accountant from Earth, had become the most feared diplomat in galactic history, not because of what he might do, but because of what he might convince you to do. The ancient warnings about humans, it turned out, had been completely accurate. They were indeed unstoppable, impossibly adaptable, and absolutely unwilling to accept that problems couldn't be solved through aggressive friendship. They treated the universe's attempts to kill them as character development and responded to every threat by trying to understand its underlying motivations. So Jake asked during the Council's next session, addressing a chamber that was now only mostly terrified of him, what other galactic problems need solving. "I brought cookies this time." As the assembled delegates contemplated a future where humanity's particular brand of optimistic problem-solving became the galaxy's new normal, one thing became abundantly clear. The universe was about to become a much friendlier place, whether it wanted to or not. And somewhere in the back of the chamber, former Captain Bloodfang, now head of station security, was learning to make human-style coffee and wondering how his life had gotten so wonderfully weird.